It's been quite a while since we've done a video on the BC-5 electric, or for that matter, any of the electric BC roasters, which they're available in the BC 3.5 and 5. They're going to have the exact same features, so covering this video on the BC-5 electric also covers all the updates on the BC 3.5. This is a 2020 model. In just a few months, the new 2021s will be out. The only difference on those will be different thermocouples and the option to add a cooling tray cover, so that won't affect any of the roasting ability. So we're going to take you through, show you some of the components, and then we're going to do a roast. I'm going to hand hold the camera, so hopefully I'm not shaking it too much. Just want to take it to what I call the back of the roast. Well, it's really the side, what I call it, because I call the front where the control panel is. We have the access door for the maintenance, such as turning on your circuit breaker, greasing your bearing, which should be done every 150 hours or every 2 months. And you'll see back here is the drum speed control, which we usually run it between about 7 and 8 on a BC-5. It's different on the bigger models. And then you can see the USB connection for Artisan and also for Cropster. With Artisan, there's the ability to connect via Bluetooth as well. We're going to take a look at the control panel, which is what I call on the front of the roaster, which is what I call this, since you're always standing in front of this position. There's only been a few changes over the past few years on the control panel on electric models. This is your power button that turns on the power of the roaster. Then we have the roasting button, which turns on the heat, which you control down here, with the heating regulator. And then we have the timer, which turns the timer on and off. It's reset with the RST button for reset. The cooling is to turn on the cooling fan for the cooling tray, and then the mixing arms is to turn on the mixing arms. And this, of course, is your hot air volume. This is one change that's occurred since the last videos. We now use a manual dial damper system, as if you've watched any of our videos on the gas models. So on this, you should turn this up to 100% and then control your airflow through the manual dial damper. And just to give you a visual, this is your manual dial damper, which you control from 0, turning counterclockwise, all the way up to 10. And on the 2020 models and beyond, there's an option to add a magnehelic gauge, which I don't have attached to this particular roaster, but you can see it on others. It would attach right at the back here, and that actually gives you a true picture of the air that's running through the drum as you turn up or turn down the manual dial damper. One thing new in the 2020 models is the power meter, and that shows you how much voltage is going through the roaster as you turn up the heating regulator. So I'm going to turn on our power here. When I turn on the power, it automatically turns on the Omrons. It turns on the ability to do the timer. It turns on the hot air, as long as you got it turned on in the fan, which you want to have it connected, obviously. And then it allows you to control all the buttons on the control panel. The BC roasters are a relatively quiet roaster. You may pick up louder sounds on this video because it's very sensitive to sound, and so it may sound louder on the video than it is in real life. But turning on the power with the fan on, you can hear the fan running in the background. This is our roasting button, which turns on the ability to heat. So when you click that on, it lights up, and now you control your heat by turning up the heat regulator, and it'll start to kick on when you get about 30 or 40%. And as you can see, if you look closely, you'll see how many amps are being used, and how many volts, or watts, I'm sorry, and also the volts. So we're going to crank it up since we're preheating all the way, and so now we've got 24.35 amps. We've got 233 volts. We're utilizing quite a bit of wattage here. So we're going to let it preheat, and when I let it preheat, I always turn the fan down, because in a commercial electric coffee roaster, you don't want a lot of cool air running through the drums, delaying the time that the preheat takes place. You might even want to turn on the timer, and usually it takes about 20 minutes, depending on ambient weather, for you to get a nice preheat on your electric commercial coffee roaster. So we're going to let it preheat there, and we'll be right back. Okay, so here we've let it preheat for about 14 and a half minutes in Arizona. Keep in mind the ambient temperature outside is probably over 95 degrees in September, and it's up to 425 degrees on the bean, 408 on the environmental temperature. Keeping in mind that we've kept this airflow down to virtually nothing, with just a slight amount of airflow running through it. Still, on your first roast, these numbers are probably not going to be the accurate number for what the metals are. That's different than what the hot air that's running through it. So usually on a first roast, we will let it preheat substantially higher than our charge temperature, which in many cases my charge temperature is between 350 and 400 degrees. So I'm letting that go a little bit longer, and then I'm going to cut off the heat, leaving the airflow virtually off, just a teeny bit running through. And I'm going to let it settle for a moment or two and see how far the temperature drops, and then I'll have more of a true picture of what the metals are inside the roaster. And then we'll charge a roast and run through a roast. So today we're going to be roasting 4 pounds of Timor coffee in the Indonesian area. And keep in mind that when you're roasting with an electric roaster, even if it's a BC-5, you're probably best to keep your roasts at 4 pounds or under, because the electric roasters are not as powerful as the gas roasters. A gas roaster may be able to do 5 roasts of 5 pounds, or even sometimes 6 roasts of 5 pounds in an hour. The electric BC-5 will probably do 3.5 to 4 roasts of 4 pounds. So I'm going to take you down and let you see where we're at. Okay, so we got distracted with some other things, but we ended up letting it get too cool, so now we're turning it back up to the full numbered, the full temperature of 100%. We've got the airflow just at about a half. The temperatures, that's probably a pretty true temperature, is about 375 degrees. We're turning on our timer. We're dropping our 4 pounds of Timor coffee, closing the hopper after every bean got in there, leaving our airflow down. Our drum speed is set at about 75 or 7.5. Some of the drum speed controls on different roasters go from 0 to 100. Others go from 0 to 10. So when we say 7.5 or 75, we mean the same thing. So sorry, but that's just the way it is. Some of the same company roasters have a different type of drum speed control. On the smaller roasters up to the BC-5, they use the ADCA drum speed control. On the ones above that, they use quite a more complicated system. Anyway, as you can see, we try to get the beans to make a turnaround in less than 2 minutes. We're dropping in beans that may be 75, 85, 90 degrees into a drum that was about 350, 375. So your beans are not getting cooler. It's just the drum was cooled down quite a bit. but as you can see, it's about ready to do a turnaround. On a typical gas roaster, it's somewhere around a minute 15 seconds, minute and a half at the most. Here it is. There it was at a minute 27 or 28 seconds at 174. Because we're doing a full roast on an electric roaster, we'll probably leave our heating regulator turned up completely, at least through the drying phase, and monitor how long it takes to go through the drying phase. We'd like to do the drying phase in 5 to 7 minutes on full roasts. Electrics may take a little longer, so we'll be checking back in a minute and see how things are going. Just a 2-minute and 20-second update. We did bump up the airflow to about 1.5. On electrics, you got to be really careful you don't bump up the airflow too fast, especially in the drying phase, because it's pulling that air that may not heat fast enough as it runs through the drum, and in some cases you'll see the hot air temperature going in reverse as it's pulling too much cool air in, which is not a good thing during the drying phase on any roaster. Taking you to the drum door so you can kind of get a visual on the beans. As you can see, they're tumbling at about a 45-degree angle. It's a little bit hard to tell when it's a full roast, but you can kind of see them falling at that angle, and that's about where you want it during your roast. Just to try to give you a little bit bigger point of perspective, I'm backed up a little bit so you can see the full roaster working away there. As I mentioned, first roast especially, and also because you're roasting in electric, it's going to take a lot longer to go through the drying phase. The second roast should be subsequently faster, but here we are. We bumped up the drum speed, the airflow to 3 to help pull a little more air through there, and at this point it's kind of boosting the rate of rise, but we're still at a pretty slow pace of only 268 degrees at 5 minutes 45 seconds. So we'll kind of keep an eye on that and see how that goes. Just to give you a little update, we're at about 308 degrees, 8 minutes into the roast. We bumped up the airflow to about 4.5 because there was quite a bit of chaff in this, and also it's helped with the rate of rise, but as mentioned, you are going to get a slower roast on electric roasters. That's just the way they are. So we'll probably hit 330 at about 9 minutes 15 seconds, and then at that point we usually kick back the power on the electric, and we bump up the airflow a little bit so that our browning or mallard phase is a little bit more slower and at a nice pace, so we can develop the subtle flavors of the coffee. So as you can see here, we have 330 degrees at 9.5 minutes. At this point, I'm going to bump back my heat to about 22, 23 amp, and about 224 volts. So it's been bumped out to about 90%. I'm also going to bump up my airflow to about 5.5. It appears from looking at the roast, it's starting to develop a nice light brown, and the chaff is being pulled out of the drum nicely, so we don't have to bump it up any higher. It's almost at about 6. Actually, I'm bumping it up to 6 on the airflow. And so we went to 9.5 minutes on the drying phase, which is pretty long if you were doing a gas roaster, but not too bad on a electric. We'll probably try to go through this roast in 15 minutes, which would allow us to do up to 4 roasts an hour. And keep in mind that first roast is always going to be a little slower than subsequent roasts, even on an electric roaster. So we'll just play it by ear. I've bumped back the heat to about 9. I've bumped the airflow up to about 6. Still seeing a decent rate of rise. Some people, shortly before it goes into first crack, will bump their drum speed up maybe 5 or 10% with the idea that it will increase the momentum. So I just bumped it up about 10%, and we'll see if that helps any. But I'm expecting it to go into first crack somewhere around 385 degrees. But we'll tune back in and see how that's going. So here we are at about 395 degrees. We just started to go into first crack about 30 seconds ago, maybe a little less. As I mentioned, this is a nice long roast, 14 minutes, 40 seconds. We're just now barely getting up to 400 degrees on the bean temperature, about 420 on the hot air. We're going to focus now on the looks of the roast as this develops. Okay, hopefully you can see it's not real well lit right here. We're at 404 degrees. We got a light brown, a light medium. I've bumped up the airflow to 7. The hot air is at 422. The bean temperature is at 407 at 15 minutes and 35 seconds. Our drum speed is at about 8.5. And we will probably take this up to about 415, maybe 420. A nice even roast. I don't know how well you can see with the lighting. But you can average about 3.5 to 4 roasts an hour of 4 pounds on a BC-5 electric. As we mentioned, the electric definitely doesn't have the power of the gas, but if you're in a position where all you can install in your facility is electric, then the BC-5 is a good choice. If you want a bigger roaster and electric, look at the Sedona 3200 electric, which will do up to 7 pounds, about 4 roasts an hour. So here we are at 16 minutes, 36 seconds, 416 degrees. We're getting close to dropping this. Okay, here we are. It's 422 degrees on the BT, 431 on the ET. I'm turning off the electric. I'm turning on the cooling and the mixing, giving it one last check. I like what I see. And it's 426 degrees, 17.5 minutes. There's 4 pounds of Timor coffee. So there you go. And you would close your door after the last bean jumped out. You'd already have more beans in the hopper, and you'd charge your next roast. And your second roast should be a little bit faster, not dramatically, but a little bit faster than the first. And the second on should have consistency because all the components inside are thoroughly heated at this point, the metals. So it takes about 2 to 3 minutes to cool the beans. Probably more like 3 in Arizona, where it's 105 degrees inside of our warehouse right now. But they're about halfway cool already. So there you are on the electric roaster. If you have any questions, email Randy, R-A-N-D-Y, at buckeyecoffee.com, and I'll be happy to answer all your questions. I hope this has helped, and I wish you the best.